this is Gila. 20 years ago, I left Britain and came to live in Israel. As to why, effectively, I found I had no choice, actually, for deep spiritual reasons, which probably many people wouldn't really understand, so I'm not even going to try and explain here. Although at first things were very hard, nowadays I've been happily married to an American Israeli for 15 years, and I live in a very nice residential area, which in some ways is probably like many areas of Britain used to be several decades back. It's pretty safe to wander around, even late at night. Actually, you can do the same in much of our capital of Jerusalem as well. There are many families with children around, and I'm used to being in loco parentis whenever I see someone else's children misbehaving and I tell them off, or I make sure a child who's been hurt or is lost is okay and someone's finding their mother. I've been handed babies to look after on buses by complete strangers and often been asked to help little children across the road. Of course, Israel isn't perfect, nowhere is, and there are areas which are less pleasant than where I live. The culture's definitely different here, and driving can be an interesting experience with some people who are likely to cause accidents, weaving dangerously around others, or suddenly backing into traffic, or suddenly stopping and expecting everyone behind them to put up with the inconvenience. But despite the present war and the internal displacement of large numbers of people living close to the borders which are being attacked, much of Israel seems a great deal more pleasant, freer, and family-friendly than Britain appears to be today. We respect free speech. I can say what I like, and I don't expect a knock on the door from thought police for misgendering someone, or for praying too close to an abortion clinic, or for offending someone else simply by expressing my own opinion. I still love and miss Britain, especially being able to wander around the lovely and many different areas of our countryside. And now, having watched the decline of what once was a great country to live in over a surprisingly short time, it really breaks my heart to see what Britain has become and is becoming today. I don't know whether the governing class is truly meant to destroy Britain as it once was, both Labour and Conservative, or maybe there is a more sinister agenda at work behind at least some of the crazy decisions. But opening the floodgates and allowing in many millions of people during less than the last 30 years with very different cultural, social and religious norms than those of Britain's native people has not only impoverished everyone else and stretched the capacity of British infrastructure to cope to breaking point, the powers that be totally failed to deal with the consequences of allowing so many millions of people who follow the ideology of Islam in particular to come here. Because sadly, Islamic ideology is incompatible with hard-won Western values of freedom and human rights. Here in Israel, we're actually at the forefront of fighting radicalized Islamic terrorists who cannot be reasoned with and simply want to murder us, preferably horribly. And we have suffered for years from suicide bombers accordingly, and rockets from Hamas, and now the terrible atrocities of last October. Tragically, and unlike any other mainstream religion, Islamic ideology is actually supremacist, anti-Semitic, misogynistic, and it's actually hateful and bigoted towards all non-adherents. And this ideology is actually worse than Nazism because of the theological imperative for anyone sufficiently brainwashed or indoctrinated to accept this theology in its entirety to murder other people they don't agree with while getting killed themselves, supposedly being the one guaranteed way to enter heaven and enjoy an eternal orgy with all those beautiful virgins. Although the Quranic passage in question really appears to refer to white grapes, which does give a somewhat different expectation for the afterlife. Actually, some members of the IDF fighting for our country right now are Israeli Arabs. Many of them are actually Muslims, and their human rights are respected here like everybody else's. But Muslims will never be in the majority, and most Israeli Arabs actually prefer to live under Israeli Jewish rule because they have far better human rights than they would under Muslim rule. And Arabs and Muslims, as well as Jews and foreigners, were all equally victims of the utterly unspeakable crimes against humanity committed during the invasion of our country on October the 7th. We're all really in the same boat as Israeli citizens, whether Jewish or not, regarding the stated intent of Hamas and other indoctrinated barbaric Islamic terrorists who want to commit genocide against us all and destroy our country completely. North of Israel is Lebanon. That used to be a majority Christian country and was relatively free and tolerant. But once Muslims became the majority there, civil war broke out and terrible atrocities were committed. And check out the story of Brigitte Gabriel on YouTube for more details. Back to Britain. Violence is definitely not the way to go, although I can understand the years of deep frustration and not being listened to among the majority of ordinary, decent British people, which have unleashed it. And the appalling responses by the Prime Minister and Home Secretary have only served to pour fuel on the flames. They and all other people involved in governing our country must be made to listen, not by riots and violence that will only play into the hands of a draconian crackdown, but by persistent and open free speech by millions of Britons. They can't arrest every one of you, can they? Who are utterly fed up with being treated like pariahs in your own native land, my native land too. By peaceful but powerful demonstrations and the refusal to back down no matter what. Immigration and two-tier policing must be stopped, and all jihadi-loving Muslims who preach hatred and intolerance towards non-Muslims and who refuse to integrate and respect the innate rights of the majority of native Britons should lose their citizenship and be deported, en masse, if necessary. It needs to be made clear that if you have immigrated to Britain or you're the child of immigrants, the onus is on you to respect the culture, religion, and human rights of its native people. That's simple common sense. Otherwise, I fear, tragically, Britain will be destroyed as any kind of free and good country to live in anymore. Thank you so much for listening.